The Hermitage Museum is justly famous for its world-renowned collection of paintings and sculpture. But any visitor will tell you that the galleries of these lovely palaces also have a stunning collection of decorative works that stand side by side with the works of fine art so many have read or heard about. In this program, you will see the historic furnishings, fabulous tapestries, colorful pottery, fine porcelain, and luxurious silver that once graced the palaces of kings and the homes of the wealthy across Western Europe and Russia. The names of the craftsmen and original owners of these beautiful and precious objects have mostly vanished into history, but their spectacular creations endure. Beginning with the Renaissance period in Italy, the world of the decorative arts will unfold as we tour the galleries and period rooms of the Hermitage. The consummate design and workmanship of these creations elevates the decorative arts from the level of mere craft to the status of fine art. Wooden chests, or cassoni, commemorated weddings in Renaissance Italy. A festive wedding procession is in progress in this one. Wealthy families displayed such chests with great pride. Not only did they serve as wedding albums, they were often painted by highly respected artists from the region. Cassoni were used to store household goods such as clothing, linen, tableware, and books. We can learn a lot about contemporary mores and customs from these scenes. Such chests were used to show off the bride's dowry. In the Renaissance, when familiarity with Greek and Roman mythology was the mark of a cultivated individual, classical allegories were especially popular topics for wedding chests. Here, a winged cherub associated with Venus holds a ring. It consists of a snake with its tail in its mouth, symbolizing eternity. On a wedding chest, this signifies the enduring bond of marriage. Themes of marital union found lively expression in decorative images drawn from classical antiquity. Master carvers lovingly chiseled charming, intertwined garlands, scrolls, and playful cherubs. The most popular ornaments of the Renaissance were delightfully fanciful combinations of hybrid animals and vegetative forms. Seemingly effortless, they reflect the late Renaissance fascination with complex symmetry. The figures were called grotesques because they were derived from the ancient Roman paintings found in underground caves called grottos. The grottos once served as rooms, bathhouses, and studies. These humorous hybrid creatures appear often in the decorative works of this era, especially in ceramics. This is an example of Italian maiolica earthenware, made of baked terracotta covered with an opaque glaze. Maiolica ware had been widely produced in Spain. The name derives from the island of Majorca, the transfer point in the importation of these ceramics from Spain. Italian maiolica pieces usually have a central image, either a persona or a historical narrative. Spanish maiolica ware is often covered with a continuous pattern. Apothecary jars bear inscriptions to label their contents. Other maiolica cylinders were decorated with realistic portraits of their owners and may have stored lotions, cosmetics, or pharmaceuticals. The Italian town of Faenza was famous for the manufacture of richly colored maiolica ware. But these historical subjects and biblical scenes are from Castel Durante. Witness the massacre of the innocents. King Herod ordered the death of all male children in an attempt to kill the Christ child. Some Maiolica pieces were commemorative. Elaborate battles and compelling dramas were played out within the confines of decorative plate rims. In this plate, two heraldic winged cherubs, symbols of victory, bear the crest of the conquerors. Menacing winged griffins support this Maiolica vessel. Monstrous and fantastic, these creatures loom from crouching human bodies. From the 15th century on, the production of fine glass in Europe was dominated by Venice. A formidable naval and mercantile power, Venice absorbed the sophisticated glass techniques of the Near East with whom she traded. Without artificially added color, blown glass had an unattractive brownish-green cast. This was remedied by adding colorants, brilliant jewel-like enamels, and decorative gilding. During the 14th century, Venetian glassmakers discovered how to make clear glass. By adding manganese oxide, they achieved a glass of unparalleled transparency. The intricate beauty of this vetro di Cina, or lace glass, unfolds before us like the petals of a fragile flower. Unrivaled in the past, Venetian glass today is still synonymous with exhilarating beauty of design and execution. A tour of the Murano glass factories is a major highlight for visitors to Venice. In Florence, master craftsmen applied themselves to the art of decorative mosaics. They used marble, agate, jasper, carnelian, malachite, and lazulite to produce colorful and even heroic pictures in stone. On this tabletop, Aurora, the goddess of dawn, drives her majestic chariot across the sky. Popular painting styles were often translated into mosaics. Some were quite inventive, cleverly reproducing illusionistic effects such as the rendering of cast shadows and realistic textures. Classical Roman floor mosaics were often a source of inspiration. Mosaic artists responded to the demand for greater pictorial realism by using ever greater numbers of tiny glass tiles. Their works became more and more like paintings. New colors were developed to enhance the desired level of illusionism. By the 19th century, when Michelangelo Barberi created this table, The Sights of Italy, artists had more than 28,000 colors at their disposal. Here, Barberi's mosaic of St. Peter's in Rome. And now we'll turn to the magnificent period rooms of the Hermitage for an experience of furniture, tapestries, and other applied arts in surroundings that suggest their original settings. The 17th century has been called the Age of Absolutism. It was a period of Baroque splendor in Europe, where nations competed for control of overseas colonies and monarchs sought to centralize their power. In France, art served the royal court's need for pomp and grandiosity. The decorative arts flourished under King Louis XIV. This tapestry was woven after a sketch by Charles Lebrun, one of King Louis's most talented painters. Tapestry looms were also used for upholstery. Lebrun's role in the development of French art was enormous. He was appointed head of the Royal Academy, the sole arbiter of artistic taste. The reign of Louis XIV, the Sun King, epitomized everything grandiose, majestic, and extravagant. This imposing throne-like chair represents the Baroque taste for florid ornamentation. Next, you will see a gorgeously outfitted bed. Even elaborately decorated beds had surprisingly small dimensions by today's standards. They were further dwarfed by enormous headboards and canopies. In this case, a lavish 15-foot-long piece of light satin embroidered in bright silk, gold, and silver serves as a headboard. Baroque artists easily adopted the splendid imagery of the classical past. In this case, a carved wood relief of a toga-clad figure in a chariot could just as easily represent the glory of His Majesty the King as it could a heroic Roman general. When Louis XIV established the Royal Furniture Works in 1662, cabinetry was elevated to a high art. Among the most gifted furniture designers was André Charles Boulle, who introduced the art of tortoiseshell inlay. Decorative elements and figures were shaped from bronze plates and embedded with richly colored shell. The makers of wood furniture were called ebonists because of their lavish use of the rich, dark ebony, which they contrasted with an array of lighter colored woods. These masterpieces, known as Boulle mosaics, were greatly admired for their technical virtuosity and the stunning, painterly effects they achieved. Colorful woods were also inlaid with mother-of-pearl and trimmed with gilded bronze. But taste in art and fashion changed. By the mid-18th century, the symmetrical and heavily ornate classical style of Louis XIV gave way to a more delicate grace. The style of Louis XV was no less rich, but more refined in appearance and more intimate in scale than the grandiose Baroque. Forms became asymmetrical and scroll-like, as in the gilded bronze framework of this clock. The Italian word rococo, or rocaille in French, is used to describe the new style. Painters, sculptors, metalsmiths, and carpenters delighted in spiraling curves and playful, sinuous lines. As new marquetry techniques flourished, somber ebony was replaced with a variety of light woods applied in thin layers or veneers. Chests of drawers continued to be popular. Rococo chests, often decorated with bronze garlands, have elegant, curved legs. In the time of Louis XV, French furniture achieved a reputation for aesthetic design and technical brilliance that has endured up to the present. For years, Europeans paid high prices for Oriental porcelain, admired for its pristine, milky whiteness. It was both aesthetically pleasing and practical. If chipped, it remained white through and through. Diplomatic and commercial agreements encouraged the expansion of trade with the Far East. Exotic aspects of Oriental art and culture, like this enthroned emperor, riveted the imagination of European collectors. There developed a veritable craze for what the French called chinoiserie. The artist who designed this tapestry, in fact, had little knowledge of life in distant China. His aim was to entertain with the charming array of fantastic and exotic details. In the late 18th century, the light-hearted, fanciful Rococo style, so closely associated with the excesses of the French monarchy, quickly fell from favor as the winds of revolution blew over France. The new French Republic chose the heroic spirit of classical Greece and Rome to represent a new sense of national pride and stoic courage. Neoclassicism, the name of the style, revered the values of antiquity, fostered by the newly discovered ruins of Pompeii and Herculaneum. Here, Venus cradles the head of her lover as he dies in her arms. The emotional restraint of this small porcelain statuette is typical of the period. By the early 19th century, Napoleon had turned the democratic dreams of the French Republic into an imperial quest. The heroic Napoleonic vision led to the revival of classicism, tempered by an elegant Grecian discipline and stylistic severity. Noble simplicity has become the aesthetic ideal. In this scene from Greek mythology, Paris, the Trojan prince, awards the apple to Venus, the fairest of goddesses. The panel is an artistic tour de force, heroic in subject and treatment. These gilded festoon merrymakers parading across the chest mimic similar processions carved into the friezes of the ancient Greek temples. The multicolored marquetry of Louis XV furniture was now rejected in favor of stately mahogany veneer and restrained gilding. French master craftsmen followed the lead of English furniture makers in choosing warm, exotic mahogany as their favorite wood. Mahogany could be handsomely gilded and painted and was easily veneered. The state maintained strict control over the production of French furniture. By 1741, French cabinet makers were required to sign their pieces, making it easier for later generations to identify individual styles. The most distinguished cabinet maker of late 18th century France was Renoir, who produced this elegant secretary. He was favored by the French queen Marie Antoinette, who was also Austrian by birth. The drop-front secretary was popular. It would not reveal its contents. The straight-legged piece is typical of the severe empire style. Gilded bronze that was hitherto used only for furniture decoration was now fashioned into freestanding works. The next works you'll be seeing mark the British presence in the Hermitage collection of decorative arts. English silver is outstanding for its workmanship, and we'll see some fine examples now. Consider the enormous scale of this gilded silver piece. It weighs 220 kilograms, or nearly 500 pounds. What would such a giant vessel have been used for? The imagery of these charming reliefs gives us clues. The grapevine motif dominates the rim of the vessel. If you look closely, you can see lazy creeping snails along with flies and caterpillars hiding under the leaves. The richly clad gentleman seems to eye the vessel admiringly, as if hoping to enjoy its contents. On each side, the handles are made in the form of human figures. One portrays a debauched satyr, servant of Bacchus, the god of wine. This lovely hand belongs to a carousing nymph, holding aloft a bunch of grapes. Her torso is the handle. 4 snarling panthers who draw back as his gilded chariot also serve as feet, elevating the piece off the ground. You might have guessed by now that this 18th century silver vessel was used for a wine cooler. The English had become the chief consumers of tea, introduced to Europe through trade with the Orient. Interest in elaborate tea services naturally brought to the forefront the talents of British silversmiths. Josiah Wedgwood's innovative cream-colored and pearl-white dinnerware earned him the title Potter to the Queen. Both visionary and practical, he experimented with industrially applied ceramics and introduced steam power in his factories. This is a creamware service for 50 guests commissioned by Catherine the Great of Russia for her summer palace near St. Petersburg. The service features views of over 1,200 actual locations in England, with figures dressed in contemporary fashion. John Flaxman, the great English sculptor, designed the shapes. Because Catherine's summer palace was set in a marshy area humorously called the Frog Bog, the set was called the Green Frog Service. We now move from English streams and Russian swamps to the German towns of Nuremberg and Augsburg. Since medieval times, these cities were known for the excellence of their metalwork. The Hermitage possesses an impressive collection of gilded silver goblets produced in Nuremberg. To become a master silversmith required time, ability, and tremendous dedication. At age 12, a youth began his tutelage in the studio of a master craftsman, with whom he served a 6-year apprenticeship. The aspiring silversmith was then required to submit his work to the local guild for evaluation. Only after passing a series of examinations was the apprentice granted the status of master. This entitled him to take on his own pupils, perpetuating the high standards of craftsmanship for which the silversmiths of Nuremberg are justly famous. According to Germanic lore, seductive sirens or Lorelei lured sailors to the treacherous rocks with their beautiful songs. This mermaid bears an exotic shell goblet, a chambered nautilus, symbol of faraway seas. Another center for fine silver in the 18th century was Augsburg, where this fruit basket was created in 1720 by the renowned German silversmith Johann Ludwig Biller. 20 years later, it was brought to Russia, where it became part of an elaborate centerpiece bearing the monogram of its owner, Empress Elizabeth. This elegant soup tureen is from a gilded silver dinner service also commissioned by the Russian Empress. It is the work of François Thomas Germain, an outstanding Parisian silversmith of the mid-18th century. Intended to charm and entertain rather than overwhelm and bedazzle, the droll figures reveal the playful attitude and gentle humor of Rococo art. The double-headed eagle was the crest of Russia. Just as sculpture was the creative source for silversmiths, so tapestry weavers drew inspiration from great painters of the day. And what could be more suitable than tapestries to adorn palatial halls? More costly than paintings, these wool tapestries serve not only to beautify interior spaces, but also to insulate them from drafts and cold. Sketches by famous artists, in this case Peter Paul Rubens, were copied by the weavers. Since the Middle Ages, Flanders was the home of a prosperous wool-weaving industry. This tapestry, by a pupil of Rubens, was probably executed in Brussels, the center of Flemish weaving in the 17th century. It illustrates the 7 liberal arts, an allegorical depiction of the entire range of human intellectual endeavors. The tapestry is almost an education in itself. The woman seated at the organ is a personification of music. And here is a representation of geometry. The artist seems to say that if you mastered this discipline, you might become an architect and build a fortress. How amazing to think that not only these lines, but also the volumetric forms that seem to have weight and mass, have been created by weaving strands of dyed wool on a loom. Here are the figures representing arithmetic. And these bales of goods remind us that talent with numbers hopefully leads to success in commerce. More common subjects for tapestries were biblical and mythological scenes illustrated in the grand manner. This one portrays the Greek hero Jason as he cuts down the golden fleece with which he may redeem his kingdom. He has been aided by the sorceress Medea, who has fallen in love with him. Like so many of the fabulous works of decorative art, the names of the creators of this tapestry have faded into the past. Even so, its enduring quality and craftsmanship have earned the work itself a place in history, blurring the boundaries between fine art and craft. These beautifully crafted objects stand on their own, communicating a special sense of harmony and perfection.